Hello, everybody. Back from a extended break with the New Year's and the holidays going on, but we're back with another episode of Life in Progress. And Charles, this one is really important and a really good topic to, again, begin 2026.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as people are making New Year's resolutions, one of them tends to be to, financial,
Right.
to improve their financial literacy and, focus on their finances. And so we thought, who better to have in than Meghan Vanderlugt, who is with Valor Wealth Group, and she's the founder and principal there, to help us talk about financial planning in the new year and wealth management. We had a really great conversation with her talking about how do you have these conversations with your family. A lot of people sometimes are deterred because they feel like they're too morbid. So she gave us some great advice on how to broach these conversations with your family, and then when to have these conversations and how to think about your financial future. So
Right.
It was a really great conversation with Meghan, and we appreciated having her on, and we hope you enjoy the show. All right. Well, Meghan, thank you again for being here today. We're really excited to kind of talk about financial planning and some of the things that people should be thinking about as they enter 2026 and are thinking about financial goals. So my first question is, for families, when should you start talking about money with your kids? Like, at what point do you start having those conversations, and what are some of the things that you should probably be hitting on at a younger, not like a young age, but when your kids are maybe like teenagers, to sort of help set them up for their financial future?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm very excited to be here. And as we think about 2026 and finances, this is a really important question, particularly for families who have children. And the answer to that is, I would say, deeply personal. But when we, in our practice, work with families, the first thing that we start with is really understanding a family's value system around money. And if there are children in that family, I think you can start the conversations with children at a pretty young age, really, I would say even elementary school. And those conversations, really, our advice would be to focus those conversations around concepts and talking about the family's value system. Again, that's going to be deeply personal, but around specific topics: earning, spending, saving, and giving. And maybe all those areas don't hit for everyone, but I think even from an elementary to kind of early teen age, those are ideas that kids can understand. Not every family does allowance, but there are ways within the household that you can incorporate those ideas at a pretty young age. Again, with starting with the family's value system around those ideas.
And obviously that's with kids, you're trying to teach them kind of the basic steps to really understand finances. But let's talk about our parents as well. I think that is something, especially in a generation like myself that I'm in, it's not something I really talk to with my parents. And even my parents have said kind of the same thing, that they don't necessarily speak about those finances with their parents. But, maybe as they're getting older, how do you kind of get to that, start those conversations? Because eventually you might need to have those conversations or figure out what your parents maybe already had in mind, just so you guys are all on the same page.
Yeah, good question, Phil. And that can be really tricky. Money, especially for an older generation, is something that tends to be more private, something that people don't talk about as openly. But I think to start conversations, first of all, to ask permission. If you're talking with your parents on a topic that may be sensitive, if it hasn't been brought up already, that may be an indication that they are private about money and finances. But to ask permission and to talk about it in a way that is a curiosity about what you as a child, your responsibilities might be for parents as they age. So asking open-ended questions about, have you considered what the plan would be should something happen to you? It can also be really hard for that generation to face their own mortality and to talk about topics that ultimately are really around death and dying, or decline in health. but asking those open-ended questions about what they may have already done from a planning standpoint, and talk about concepts. Don't talk about dollars, because that can make parents feel like kids are just looking for a money grab or an inheritance. Those can be important things for everyone to understand, but that's probably not a great starting point.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was just gonna say with like a lot of people tend to be afraid to broach these subjects because of they don't want to be morbid or make anyone feel like death is right around the corner.
Right.
And then also people are afraid that they're going to come off as greedy possibly. And so are there good ways to sort of address these topics without feeling so focused on like death and dying, and also to kind of get past the I'm not trying to find out how much money I'm getting, but I would like to know how you're prepared so that I can be prepared.
Yeah. So I think, again, to not talk about the dollars, and maybe to talk about in hypotheticals, like if something should happen to you, mom and dad, what would the plan be, or who would you like me to call? And really emphasizing that the goal is to honor the wishes of your parents. And if you don't know what their wishes are, it's going to be very hard to honor those wishes. So I think, again, starting by asking questions that are not directed specifically at the dollars. I think you can also talk about experience. You wouldn't have to look far to whether your own parents, or I have examples in our family with my parents and their friends when there have been very abrupt deaths or illnesses. And I think you can point to those examples, and really that can draw out conversation to say, if this were to happen in our family, how would you like it handled? Or have you made plans in the event that this were to happen to you?
Yeah.
Well, that's a really great, lead into this next question, because obviously you are looking for maybe a way to start these conversations, but you also want to make sure that you are taking the time to make a plan ahead of something if maybe they were to happen. I mean, outside of maybe bridging the gap with somebody outside of the family to kind of start that conversation. I mean, when should we really be having these conversations, not just with our parents, but maybe with our kids, kind of tying it back into the beginning? I mean, is there like milestones or really an age maybe when we should be focusing on beginning these conversations if we haven't had them already?
Yeah. So I would suggest that there is not a specific age, but when you do hit milestones, like you've got kids graduating from high school, and even ahead of that, depending on what the plan is for them post college or post high school, who's going to be financially responsible for that child? Are they going to be on their own? Are parents planning to help pay for life after high school, post-secondary education, or some sort of trade school? These are all things that I think parents definitely need to talk with kids about, so that the kids know what to expect. I always say we've got a blended family. We've got 5 kids, and our kids are from 14 to age 26. And at every age, the kids always do better when they know what to expect. I think we all do. And so preparing kids for what's going to be their responsibility. So those types of conversations ahead of a milestone like graduating, even a marriage, if talking about financial planning ahead of that, so that kids are as prepared as they can be to be in a co-financial situation that maybe they haven't been in before. I think those are important milestones. And anytime there is a health crisis or death, those tend to elicit those conversations, but to the extent that we can get planning ahead of that, I think that's really important.
Yeah. Now, graduation is a great point, because I can remember when I was graduating college having that conversation with my parents about, hey, you're about to get a lot of money from people in your life. Make sure you know what to do with it, and don't, blow it all on your first apartment or a brand new car or anything like that. So again, just kind of, looking at the milestones that we know are coming up in people's lives to kind of base that around is great.
Yeah,
great
I've got 2 kids in college. We've got 2 out of college and post-grad school, and some of it we're participating in, some of it we're not. And I have a daughter who's graduating in May with a degree in nursing, and we've had extensive conversations about budgeting and what is life going to look like from a financial perspective when she's finished. I'm not sure she's totally prepared, so that might be on me, but these are really important things to talk about. What's it going to cost every month for a rent payment?
Right.
How much money are you expected to earn with a degree in nursing?
Are you planning to come visit more often? You got to budget out,
Are you
flights. That was a
expecting
big
to
thing for
live
me to
here?
kind of
I mean,
think about. Yeah.
And really setting expectations, because
Right.
we've, that's been a difficult thing. Those can be hard conversations, even with children who you love dearly, about financial expectations and, where you're going to live.
Yeah. Well, and then too, sometimes parents think that like you plan for certain scenarios, like you think you might be able to help your children through a certain age of their life. And sometimes things change, like there's a job loss or a layoff or something, and you find, like a parent might find that what they thought they were going to be able to provide has changed. Or even like maybe you have a cottage and there's a health situation and you've got to sell the cottage, and at some point you had told your kids that they would inherit it. How do you have conversations or check-ins when life changes and maybe your financial plans as a parent have changed and you need to make sure that your kids are aware that things aren't going to be what you originally thought they were going to be?
Yeah, that can be really difficult, particularly when it's going in a direction that could create disappointment. I think more information and transparency in those situations in particular is always going to be better. But there's no easy way around a difficult conversation. But honesty and addressing it early, particularly if there's going to be something that materially changes your child's outlook and their financial plan. Because when we set expectations for money and then it's not going to be there, that can be hard. But I would say getting in front of it as quickly as possible and having open, honest conversations.
All right. Well, one thing I did want to spend a little bit of time on is the fact that when people think about financial planning, you might not have tons and tons of money maybe stashed away in a savings account, or maybe you're not expecting anything, but you still have to plan out your finances and get those in order. And maybe if something were to happen, you're a little bit more prepared. You could help out your family as much as you can. This is something that everybody needs to kind of pay attention to. It's not just a wealthy family thing or somebody who has inherited a ton of money. I mean, this is something that all of us should really be kind of paying a closer eye towards.
Yeah, that's right. This is not just an issue for families with extreme wealth.
Right.
And I think you're right. That is a misperception. So there are a couple of key legal documents that are important, I would say, for every adult to have. A basic will is a set of instructions for the probate court at your passing. And so again, these are tough topics, talking about life and death. But if you have minor children and any assets at all, bank accounts, cars, any assets, it would be really important to have this. It's going to tell the court who's going to take care of your minor children and who's going to get any assets that you have. And again, these don't have to be big balances,
Right.
but that would be a starting point. In addition to that, a financial power of attorney and a health care power of attorney. And those documents really give someone who you would name while you're able authority to make decisions on your behalf while you're alive but incapable, incapacitated. So financial power of attorney, as it sounds, is for financial matters, and a healthcare directive would be for someone to make decisions about your healthcare if you're incapacitated.
And what if once you've made, like, let's say you're single and you make those documents, and then you get married, that doesn't your new spouse doesn't automatically become that person, correct? Don't you have to then go back in and make changes? Or what would a spouse automatically take over, or do all those things have to be changed?
Yep, that's a good question. And those things would all have to be changed. If it ended up in the probate court, so if you didn't name your spouse would ultimately still have access to the assets unless you had named somebody else specifically. So let me take a step back. On bank accounts and retirement accounts and some other investment accounts, you can name a beneficiary, which is simply the person who would be entitled to those assets or those dollars after you're gone. So if you've named somebody directly, it won't matter if your spouse, if you're married, the person who is named will get those assets. But if you get married and you don't have somebody named, through probate court, your spouse would still get it. It's a long process, it's expensive, and it's public. So it's a matter of public record.
Right.
Well, I want to take a quick step back because, one thing I love about Life in Progress is that I get to ask the questions that I myself am very curious about. And, as we can have our experts come in, I get to ask them directly. How do you make a will or a power of attorney? I mean, where do these first steps even come from? As somebody who doesn't have any kids, doesn't have a spouse right now, and doesn't really have a whole lot to really, I guess, leave behind if something were to happen. Again, this is a very morbid topic. But again, how do you begin this process? I mean, where's that first step that you have to take when you decide this is something that needs to get done and I'm going to start working towards it?
Yeah. So there are some good online tools if you don't have a lot of complexity. You're a single person, you've got maybe a few accounts, bank accounts, things like that. I think online resources are going to be a really inexpensive way to get straightforward documentation. So I would say start there. If you have some complexity, minor children and investment accounts, and you want some additional education and control over how and when those assets will be distributed in the event of your passing, then that does require probably more expertise by an estate planning attorney. So at our firm, we know a lot about estate planning. We are not attorneys. We don't draft legal documents, but we can really help clients think through what are all the possibilities and all the scenarios from a planning perspective. Who is going to get the money and when they're going to get it? Those tend to be the biggest questions.
Right.
What about if you have kids and you don't designate somebody in particular to take that responsibility if something happens to you? What happens to your kids?
Yeah, that gets worked out in probate, in court, and it would generally be a family member. But again, if you don't decide, the court's going to decide for you. And most people would probably want to have that say. And so putting those documents in place for minor children, particularly if you have minor children, is really important.
And there's some obvious words that I want to help explain to everybody watching, those namely being beneficiaries and executors. If you wouldn't mind just kind of describing what both of those terms mean and also just kind of what we need to know about each of those different parts regarding these financial documents that we've been kind of talking about recently.
Yep. So a beneficiary is the person who is entitled to the assets. So if you name a beneficiary on a bank account and you pass away, that beneficiary is going to receive the proceeds or the dollars in that account. It will be rightly theirs at your passing. We often hear beneficiaries on life insurance policies. Again, is the person or people who are entitled to what remains after somebody passes away. In terms of an executor, that is the person who is in charge of distributing the assets and ultimately making not the final decisions, because the decisions get made in the legal document, but they're in charge of carrying out those wishes. One additional term that often is thrown around is a trustee, and a trustee is similar to an executor in that a trustee is in charge of carrying out the wishes or the document, a trust document, and carrying out what somebody has detailed in that document.
How do you know that the person that you select to be your executor or trustee will follow your wishes? Like, are they legally bound to do what you have asked?
They are legally bound, so that is absolutely right. If somebody had a complaint or felt like it wasn't being handled properly, they could take that up. Again, it's going to be an issue that goes to court, and that can be costly and it can take a lot of time. So when thinking about who you want to be in charge of your minor children, probably most importantly, and your finances when you're gone, you really want to think about someone who is trustworthy and accountable and is going to carry out what you desire according to the legal documents that you're putting in place.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of the next question of how do you maybe decide who is going to be what in this situation, once you're gone. It can be a little bit daunting, I guess, of a task to say maybe if you had a couple of kids to say, which one of you is going to be maybe the executor? Who do I maybe want to put in charge of this? I mean, that can be, again, another issue that kind of arises from this. So again, it's really important to know who you can trust and who you want to have that really ahead of time.
Oh gosh, it can be a really, really difficult thing because it puts that person in a position of power. Again, you're executing wishes according to a legal document that's already been specified. But we had a family situation where there was one person who was in charge of a trust after a family member passed away, and definitely took the power of that position and really abused it. And it's an issue that could have gone to court. It wasn't worth that, but it created a lot of animosity between siblings and a lot of unnecessary issues. So it's definitely, I would say there's not an easy answer. It's not necessarily the oldest child. It should be somebody who's financially responsible and maybe reasonably well educated in that area. And if you don't have someone in your family, you can always point a non-family member. It doesn't have to be a family member, although it often tends to be.
And this is just another question that I just popped up into my mind, and so I don't mean to catch you off guard or anything, but say somebody, your parent, were to maybe get into a car accident and they passed away, and alongside was maybe another family member who was the executor of the will, or maybe was gonna, receive some of it. I mean, what happens next? I guess, the two people that, the person that left the will and the person who was supposed to take over, they're both gone now. I mean, who does that fall into now?
Yeah, in some cases there could be a successor executor or successor trustee named, which would be the second person. If somebody isn't named, then generally a family member would have to petition the court to take over that responsibility. And depending on who it is, the court would have to decide if that person should be in charge. But again, that's going to go back to, in that case, a court decision.
Right.
What if somebody doesn't have a lot of money and something happens to them and somebody like their daughter or son is responsible? What kind of financial obligations do they have to deal with the departed family members? Like, they're not really assets, but what's left and taking care of any obligations that they might have in terms of money?
So in terms of debt obligations, those are not the responsibility of a family member unless their name was specifically on that debt.
Okay.
A notice goes out after someone passes away, and I think it's 6 months. I'd have to double check that number, but creditors have that much time to make a claim on the estate for any debts that are owed. And once that time has passed, then the estate can be settled and any remaining assets can be paid out to the beneficiaries. In some cases, it's just cleaning up a mess. Maybe it's not a financial debt, but it's selling a home. And we actually have another family member who passed away and left 2 children with a home in Florida that they don't have the financial capability. I mean, they've taken on the responsibility, I think, with the hopes that they would have an asset to sell. Well, it turns out that asset is worth less, and they are in a little bit of a financial bind. They could have walked away from that, but I think with the hope that there would be some equity in that transaction. They decided to take it on. Probably wasn't the right decision, but it can be messy. And in this case, there was not good planning.
Right.
Well, and obviously this is already such a very difficult time for so many people. You know, you got to worry about funeral costs or, what's next? How do I take care of myself and, the family that's left? But you want to make sure that you're as prepared as possible. And I think that's something that we've kind of been echoing during this conversation. But is there a limit to how many times we can change our will or maybe change our financial plans? I mean, I think, as we want to be as prepared as possible, there might be those times when we still have a little bit of time to maybe make those changes. Maybe they happen a little bit too often. I mean, is there a limit to how often or how many times we can change our will or other finances?
No, so long as you're not making irrevocable decisions. And so there are a handful of planning techniques that you would use with an attorney generally for higher net worth families that are irrevocable, and that's what they are. You cannot undo that. But absent that planning strategy, there is no limit on how often you can change your beneficiaries. And as life changes, your plans, not just beneficiaries, but it's no problem to continue changing as life changes. Who's going to get and who's going to be in charge of your children and assets when you're gone.
Right.
Well, and then that brings me to the Aretha Franklin case that I think a lot of people have heard about, where there was a will that they had found after her death, but then they found a second will in the couch cushions, and there was a court case about which of these two wills was going to be the one that would be followed. So first of all, I guess this is kind of a two-pronged question, like how do you make sure that you're keeping your documents where people can find them, and like how do you find somebody's stuff after they passed away and you have to find out what they had requested? And then what happens if there are multiple documents out there? How do you determine which one is the one that will be followed?
I would suggest that the most recent, as long as the person who's signing the document doesn't have some sort of mental incapacity issue going on, but the most recent document by date that's signed. I also generally recommend having those documents witnessed. A notary is even better to just verify that the person who's signing the document, that is legitimately who they say they are. But it can be tricky if you have multiple changes, but generally we're going to follow the date on the most recent change or amendment to those documents.
All right. Well, I think we should also kind of spend a little bit time talking about the sandwich generation. You know, those people, maybe younger adults, maybe in their late 30s, early 40s. They've got kids, so they're taking care of their younger children, but they've also got aging parents as well. I mean, I feel like a lot of us are kind of in that mold right now of kind of deciding, what's best for my kids. I got to worry about mom and dad as well. What are some of these challenges that people are maybe facing, or maybe that you've kind of seen firsthand from people that come in and are asking you questions, like, how do I do this? How do I do that? What are some of those challenges that they're facing, and how would you maybe recommend they go about rectifying those?
I think the number one challenge, is the emotional strain and drain on caring for parents and children. My best advice for that is probably to get a therapist. And
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not kidding.
Yes.
But I think that can be super helpful because you're caring for and also grieving the loss of parents who were once in a very different role.
Right.
And now you're a caretaker, or starting that process to think about them more as children and with greater needs. Depending on their financial situation, there can also be financial pressures of what if they don't have the means to have the care that they may need? And so does that mean either you pay out of pocket or round up your siblings and pass the hat, or mom and dad are going to be moving in with someone? I'd go back to what we talked about at the beginning and having conversations early about what their desires are. That may not be possible if there's not enough resources, financial resources, or if there's a health crisis, those initial desires. But I would say to the extent that there could be a plan in place for different scenarios, I would get out in front of that, because I think then as the children in the sandwich generation, you know what to expect.
Right.
Or at least there's some outline for what will happen. But taking care of kids, running kids, I'm not quite to that point with my parents yet. If they end up watching this, you're welcome.
Well, and with like going back to two families where you have like brothers or sisters and you're all in that sandwich generation with your own families, how much communication needs to be happening between siblings as you're dealing with your aging parents and your own families? Like, what are the dynamics what's like a good case scenario for working with siblings?
Hopefully there's a lot of communication. I think what I've seen, both friends and family, is that one or two siblings generally ends up stepping up and having the predominant role as either caregiver or kind of directing traffic for a parent's care. I still think it's really important to have other kids involved or give them the chance, because I do think there can be resentments later about who had more input, more time. At the end of a parent's life, when you get hospice involved, those decisions can be, really, really difficult, and to have more communication and more input from everyone, I think generally saves relationships later.
Mm-hmm. And probably having communication from your parents too, if you do have siblings who they have charged with some of this stuff. I think it would be kind of a shock if you didn't know which sibling was going to be the executor of the will, or which sibling was the person that gets to make the health decisions. I mean, it would seem like those would be important conversations your parents should be having to make sure that nobody's surprised by what's coming down the pipeline.
Absolutely. And so again, back to the planning conversation, I think it's important to have everyone, if they're willing, to be a part of those, in terms of siblings and parents, to be a part of those conversations, so everyone's on the same page and knows that when that time should come, if and when it comes, who's going to be in charge. Because surprises generally don't go well, and that can lead to deterioration of relationships, and hard to make decisions in a stressful situation already, but add in a surprise of why did he get to be make the medical decisions. We have had family conversations where we've had very candid conversations about understanding who's in charge of my parents' medical decisions, who's in charge of the money. And I think that's hopefully will be helpful when the day comes that someone has to act on that.
Right.
Well, kind of wrapping up now, Megan, I mean, for somebody that maybe hasn't had a lot of money in the past, and maybe they are now being given a lot of money after the death of a family member, and now they kind of don't know what to do with it, or maybe trying to figure out ways to make it last and stretch as long as possible. I mean, what is that sort of, for people that maybe are just unfamiliar with having that kind of money all at one time? I mean, what is the best way for them to kind of maximize its longevity and not just spend it all maybe in a weekend or something like that?
Yeah. Don't go to the casino.
Right.
Right.
Best bet there, yeah.
Right. Don't put it all in black.
House always wins, all that.
Yeah, I think meeting with a financial planner or someone like our firm is a great start. Our job is to understand your full financial picture. So if it's an inheritance that you've recently come into, what income do you have? What other assets might you have? And really understanding your value system. What is it that you want this money to do? And once we understand a person's full balance sheet and their financial picture, then we can start making recommendations for what to do with that money. And sometimes that's going to be purchasing a home. Sometimes it's going to be putting it in an account and investing it. And we do spend a lot of time on planning, and then also educating the clients we work with on different financial and investment vehicles that can get them to where they want to go with the wealth that they've inherited or created.
I have a follow-up question on that. So, not just somebody passing away and inheriting, but some people set up trusts for their kids that they can access at like 21, or I don't know what all the ages are, but how do you, at what point too, if you do have a trust for your children and they're coming into where they're going to be able to access that money, how do you, and I'm speaking from, I know somebody who inherited some money, or who got trust fund money at the age of 21 and blew it pretty quickly. So how do you in those situations kind of help your children navigate coming into a large sum of money that maybe was intended for like college, but I guess they don't have to use it that way. So how can you kind of help prepare them for that?
Yeah, I think first of all, with some of the planning documents and the trust documents, the person who is planning to give that money has a lot of discretion about when and how the beneficiary, the recipient of those funds will get it. And I would always suggest, our own financial plan includes this, that I do not want my kids to get a big lump sum of money before they're prepared to handle that. And so deciding ahead of time when they're going to get it. And I would, in general, say that people of all ages are probably better off to have a little bit of money every month stretched out over a long period of time instead of a huge lump sum that, again, feels like a lottery winning.
Right.
And to have your lifestyle enhanced a bit is great, but it can create trouble. I have seen more negative than positive for the beneficiaries of large lump sums of money. So if your kids are getting that, I would say talk to the person who gave it to them.
Yeah. Well, and then too, another question that I had was, like we were talking, a lot of people don't necessarily grow up with wealth, but as they start accumulating it, when do they need a financial planner, or when do they need to start going from looking at resources online to finding a person to actually advise them? Like, is there a threshold or something that kind of helps indicate when you're ready to start working with an individual on wealth management?
I would say it's never too early, but if you're working and have an opportunity to save money in a workplace retirement plan, generally it's a 401k is a pretty common workplace retirement plan. This is a great way to start putting money away. Oftentimes those plans have a representative who can help make a decision about how much you're putting into that plan. And I would say there's no dollar amount where I would say it makes sense, but if you're earning income and paying taxes, try to take advantage of some things that are at your fingertips. Once you start accumulating wealth and have excess income outside of your work retirement plan, then I think it does make sense to start educating yourself either with online resources or talking with someone like our firm about how to manage those extra dollars.
Phil, do you have any other?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by, Meghan. I mean, this has been super great information, but then also, again, we're starting to have those conversations. We joked about it a little bit that this is a very serious, very morbid conversation to have, but again, these are conversations that need to have. So if we can make it a little bit easier for people to kind of bridge that gap, I'm just so glad we were able to. And Meghan, I can't thank you enough for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
All right, another great conversation. Yeah. Thanks again to Meghan Vanderlugt for coming in, again from Valor Wealth Group. She's the founder and principal there. We appreciated it and hope everybody has some great takeaways from our conversation. Phil, I think you had a few good takeaways.
Yeah, definitely. You know, as I said it in the interview, it's always fun actually getting to answer questions that I myself have been asking. And really, again, I'm sure a lot of other people watching may be feeling the same questions. So again, if you maybe want to go back, well, you can check out this latest episode of Life in Progress or check out all of the other previous episodes as well right here on Wood TV Plus. Charles, thank you so much. We'll see you again next time.
All right. Thanks, Phil.